The Waynesburg University baseball team ended their 6-game losing streak last Friday with a win over the Geneva Golden Tornadoes. Before they had that big victory with that, after that losing streak, they did lose to W&J 5-2. They did win against Geneva 2 games in a row, 5-1, then 3-0, and then they lost in that second game of the doubleheader last Saturday by a score of 5-3. So a little bit better of a record, 2-2 in those last 4 games. Why don't you go over some of the stats for those, JD?
Yeah, for Washington and Jefferson, it was the same story that we've heard about all season long. You had 3 errors in that game, 11 runners left on base. Nick Burdine was 2 for 4 in that game. Neil Jakobin and Derek Zavatsky was 1 for 3. And then you had Brian Resnick, who had 4 innings pitched, 8 hits, 2 earned runs, and 3 strikeouts. And then you had Tyler Prevost come in relief. He gave up 3 runs. Only 1 of those runs was earned on 2 hits.
And as you mentioned, David Hausman, he kind of has solidified his spot at second base. That was kind of an iffy spot for this team coming into the season. Not really sure who would start there. Andrew Rose gets some time at second base as well, but David Hausman really coming on strong. He has a .333 average, which is in the top 5 of the team, so that's something great to see when the team is able to have your second baseman up there hitting well. Also, Neil Jakobin, name you mentioned, he's only played in 12 games this season so far, but he is averaging .385 batting average, so whenever he comes in the game, he will be able to hit the ball for this team. And you mentioned that 5-1 win over Geneva on Friday. That really set the tone for the weekend for this team. They had that 6-game losing streak, as we mentioned, so they really needed that victory, and it was 1-1 going into the 9th inning, so really a pitcher's duel throughout that game until Waynesburg finally broke it open, as you mentioned, in that top of the 9th inning with 4 runs. So they really saw the production from Clay Roman, Nick Burdine, and Bobby Hartman. Each of those guys had more than 2 hits, and that's the meat of that order, and that is the part of the team that really needs to step up in these upcoming games, especially in these PAC games. Waynesburg sits in 6th place, I believe, in the PAC, and they're chasing Thomas More. They play them this coming weekend, tomorrow and Saturday. 3 games against Thomas More. Is 8-4 in the PAC. We'll go over the rest of the PAC standings in a little bit, but looking at these games, you just really need that production from those 3 main guys that they saw in that 5-1 win against Geneva.
Yeah, and I mean, looking at these games that they were able to win or at least compete in, the big thing was pitching. Going into Friday's game, they had a .577 team ERA. That is not going to win you a lot of ball games. They got great pitching performances, as I mentioned, from J.J. Paskert and Brian Resnick. And then you had Connor Furwa come in and pitch. It wasn't his best start, only going 3 2/3, giving up 4 earned runs on 7 hits and 1 walk, so not what he wanted to see. And then Thomas Ellis, though, a bright spot coming in, pitching 3 1/3 innings, only 2 hits and no earned runs, so nice to see him come in and have a quality outing. But overall, the pitching did steadily improve, and that's going to be the key going down the stretch if they're going to want to make a push here in the PAC standings.
And to make that push, they are going to need the leadership and from their top 2 players, Nick Burdine and Clay Roman. Nick Burdine averaging .400 on the season, 4 home runs, 28 RBIs. Clay Roman, a .367 average with 8 stolen bases, which is tied for the team lead. So if Clay Roman can get on the base pads, he will more than likely be able to move himself around, which will in turn help the team, because then you have guys like Nick Burdine and Bobby Hartman and Adam Horning who can hit in Clay Roman in those clutch situations, as we talked about in that 5-1 win. So really, you have to look at the pitching, as you talked about. Brian Resnick is 4-1 overall on the season, only a 2.81 ERA. So this team, when they have the pitching performances that we know they can have, they're not giving up a lot of runs. Sometimes they just struggle in the offensive category of not scoring enough runs for their pitchers to be able to support them. And that's one thing that I think, looking into their upcoming PAC games, they will need offensive production regardless of where it comes from.